Okay, the live streaming is on. We'll begin. Okay. In the meantime, Bhumi, I'll make you co-host as well so that we can admit more guests. Okay, the live streaming is on. Yes, yes. We'll begin. In the meantime, okay. Juthai, everyone. I'm Rakhi Naiding, President, Dimasa Scholars League, and I welcome you all to the 111th birth anniversary celebration of Gedema Joy Bhadro Hagjer, one of the tallest leaders of the Dimasa community. We at Dimasa Scholars League commemorate this special occasion as Dimasa Progressive Intellectuals Day to celebrate him and promote the ideals that he stood for and represented, which are freedom, unity, equality, and progress of one and all, irrespective of our ethnicities, genders, or class. Before proceeding to today's book discussion, which I know that all of us are eagerly looking forward to, I, on behalf of the Dimasa Scholars League, would like to pay rich tribute to Gedema Joy Bhadro Hagjer by reading out a brief history of the life and times of Gedema Hagjer. Uh, so Joy Bhadro Hagjer was a Dimasa political leader, as we all know, and a social activist. He was born on the 2nd of April, 1914 at Nanadisha near Haflong to Haishoram Hagjer and Ringlaidi Hagjer. He studied at the government high school in Shillong and passed his matriculation with first division. He then passed his intermediate in Cotton College with first division and then took up BA with honors in English from MC College, Sylhet, under Calcutta University in the year 1938 and became the first graduate from Dimahasao. As a college student, he organized an association of the Dimasa youth of present-day Dimahasao, and he named it the Progressive Youth Organization. Soon after, he got an appointment as the assistant jailer and was posted at Nogao, but he soon resigned from that position to take up the position of a Mouzadar in Haflong. During the Second World War, the British government wanted to raise a labor force from present-day Dimahasao to assist the British government's war efforts and forced conscription on the tribal youth of the region. During this time, it was Joy Bhadro Hagjer who criticized this forced recruitment and which was met with anger by then SDO and ME Sergeant John Perry, who invoked the Defense of India rule and arrested Joy Bhadro Hagjer and interned him. Soon after his release from internment, he joined the Indian Air Force in 1944 as sergeant and was posted in Ambala in Punjab. During this time, the Constituent Assembly was busy preparing the draft of the Constitution of India, to which he sent his suggestion on the type of administration suitable to the hills of Assam. Soon after the independence, he resigned from his job in the Air Force and returned home and stationed himself at Mahur. During this time, he entered the arena of politics after 1950 and 1952. He contested the first general elections, which he won. He was, during this time, married to Nirupama Hagjer in 1950, who also took up social and political activism alongside her spouse. Hagjer was elected as a member of the Autonomous District Council in 1952 and became an executive member. In the Bishnuram Medhi cabinet, he became the parliamentary secretary. And in 1955, he was elevated to the status of a deputy minister in charge of the PWD. He also served a term in the Rajya Sabha for 4 years, being elected uncontested from the hills. In 1962, he became the cabinet minister in charge of education in the ministry headed by late Bimala Prasad Saliha. He was successful in the next general election held in 1967 too, and he got the portfolio of the tribal area development thereafter. Gedema Joybhadro Hagjar passed away on the 18th of July, 1973. He was a social activist who strove to uplift his people socially, economically, and politically throughout his lifetime. And when he was working as a Mozadar, it is said that he would go from village to village barefoot in order to raise awareness among the people, to unite and reorganize to work towards the community development and upliftment. He emphasized on education and bore the education costs of several youth. Hagjar was also the founding member of the Boro Sahitya Sabha and was its president from 1952 to 1966. It was under his leadership, as well as that of Sonaram Thousand, another visionary leader, the present day Boro Kacharis saw great development of their language and literary culture, for which he is equally revered today among the Boros besides the Dimasas, with several schools and colleges named after him in different parts of Assam. Thus, Joybhadro Hagjar, throughout his life and his work, represents ideals which are meant not just for the Dimasa people in particular. In fact, they are universal, which are a zeal for freedom, for unity among the larger Kachari nation, for equality among one and all, and for the development of one and all. For this, I, on behalf of Dimasa Scholars League, pay rich tributes to his great soul, and we hope that his ideals live on in our zeal for building a society where these values and ideals thrive. We at Dimasa Scholars League, we hope that in the near future, through the commemoration of the Dimasa Progressive Intellectuals Day, we are able to bring to the public discourse our historical as well as contemporary intellectuals who represent these ideals and who are working towards establishing these ideals in the larger society. On this note, now let us proceed towards today's book discussion. The book that we have for discussion today is, as we all know, it is called Forests and Fields of Imagined Futures, Indigenous Women and Conservation Practices in Northeast India. The authors of this book are Nipasa Datta and Dejna Daulagofu. They are already here with us. And our discussant for today's discussion will be Dr. Pamidi Hagjar. Before handing over this session to the discussant, to the chair, that is to Pamidi, I would like to introduce her. Dr. Pamidi Hagjar is Assistant Professor, Department of Sociology, Tezpur University, and is currently the Treasurer of Dimasa Scholars League and one of the backbones of the organization. I thank you, Pamidi, for agreeing to chair today's discussion. And with this, I hand over today's session to you. Thank you and Jutai to all.
Thank you, Rakhi, Jutai, and I welcome everyone to today's book discussion. Rakhi has already wonderfully, I think, introduced the purpose of why we are here today, not just for, discussing this wonderful work that our guests, our resource persons for today, they have published, but also to reflect on the future of the people, which late J.B. Hagjar had and his contemporaries has worked hard for. So without any further ado, I think we are really excited about today's session. So once again, I welcome Dejna and Nipasha, and I welcome everyone for joining us today. As Rakhi has already said, the title of the book is Forest and Fields of Imagined Futures, Indigenous Women and Conservation Practices in Northeast America. I think from the title itself, it is very clear like what sort of themes we will be looking into. the themes of indigenous women, the ecology, particularly in the context of Assam. And I think it is also indicative of the changing landscape in Northeast India as well. Um, so before we get into what the possible themes that we could, discuss, I think it is best if we let Dejna Dolagufu and Nipasha Datta to share with us briefly about their own background and what were the motivations behind working and publishing this very, very critical book. Perhaps you can tell us about the process of researching and just briefly tell us how you came to this problem that you were, you focused on in this book. Yeah.
Uh, Hi, everyone. Good evening. First of all, thank you to Dimasa Scholars League for giving us this opportunity. Hello, everyone. I'm Nipasa Datta. I'm an independent researcher based in Guwahati. And Forests and Fields of Imagined Futures was published last year in June as when I was working with NESRC, Northeastern Social Research Center. NESRC is a center which has over the years nurtured, young researchers, and they have trained young researchers right after, finishing their masters, and given opportunities for us to know what research is from through our first-hand experiences and carrying it out from A to Z. If I have to talk about how we came about, this topic and how we came about writing this book and researching on it. What NESRC actually does is over the years, we have certain topics which every year we explore on it more. So some of these topics include land, gender, peace. And in 2022, I was already working on a project on migration and women. And in the meantime, Walter Fernandez, our director of NESRC, and senior researcher who was there at that point of time, Neenal Tula, we were discussing on what needs to be, what can be our next go-to thing. And because Meenal Tula and Upasana Goswami were already working on a project on uh, women's relationships with their lands among three communities, which is Garo, Khasi, and Garo, Karbi, and Dimasa. We decided that we would keep the area of studies the same, but we were still, pondering over what can be our next aspect that we can explore more on. And that is when Meenal suggested that, sacred groves or sacred sites is something which she had come across in Dima Hasao. And that can be a point where, we can explore the role of women in it. And of course, the first at first, the idea was just to focus on sacred sites and or sacred groves and the role of women within these places, and to contextualize what sort of a role do women play, what do women think of, women of the community think about these sites, and is there any sort of conservation happening in these places. But as we went to the pilot study, we saw that conservation happens, but there are a lot of other things, which we have to consider, such as which happens in the everyday acts of the women in their lands, in their homesteads. So we decided to expand our area, and it is actually very interesting that the journey of this book actually has been very unexpected and surprising in that way, that we started with something completely different, and what we have in hand today is completely different. And so that is how the idea came about of continuing something that had already been done, and then amalgamating it with new ideas of conservation, like how we can look at conservation in new ways within these three communities. And now I think Dejna can also speak a little bit more about it.
Yeah, so like Nipasa said, we've been very lucky to be given this opportunity as fresh postgraduates. Me, I did my master's and bachelor's in anthropology, and so I'll just give you a rough background of my journey to this point. So I studied anthropology, and it was a BSc MSc course. So I also studied the other three subdisciplines within anthropology: primate studies, which comes under physical anthropology, genetics, and all of that. There was archaeological anthropology and then social anthropology. And then I specialized in social anthropology during my master's. But the curriculum that we followed was filled with colonial writers. And I would read about colonial writers writing about tribal communities, indigenous communities in the Northeast in a very detached sort of way. And I try to find uh, meaning in that, try to find sense in, reading anthropology like this. And then later on, I decided to come back again to my region, Northeast India, and then through engagement with other scholars and doing field work with them, I realized, oh, I mean, there is need for indigenous researchers or tribal researchers to um, claim their own narrative within academia, within anthropology. And then I happened to find out about NESRC, and I happened to apply. And I was actually not aware that a book would come out of this. I was just applying because I wanted to do more field work in the region and learn more about it. And then it so happened that the project included publishing the work in the form of a book. So yeah, that's how we ended up here. And about the book, shall I introduce the book a little bit more?
Yes, please.
Okay. So my background is in, not background exactly, my master's thesis was on June. So I was already very much interested in uh, agriculture, agrarian transformation within upland tribal communities. So it was quite a coincidence that NESRC was also trying to work with women and agrarian communities here. And so this book basically, I mean, in the beginning, like Nipasa said, it started very differently. And then again, we were very lucky to be able to take our own liberties, developing what we want to say in the book and using our own voices. So what we try to do in this book is place our arguments and discussions within the community's own worldviews. Uh, Placing it in the specific cosmology, talking about borrowing from orality a lot, and talking about multi-species affective relationships and everyday practices of, we can call it conservation, in the way of uh, doing their livelihood duties in the June fields or foraging in the forest. How do women contribute to conservation in their own way? Um, yeah, so in that way, I think this book is different and contributes um, uh, to anthropology from the Northeast in the way that, I mean, we really prioritized um, folk tales and stories and orality in our book, and did not try to fit it into like the dominant framework of looking at things, but yeah. And yeah, so I'll just go through the main themes that our book deals with.
Hmm.
So the first chapter, it talks about the way indigenous communities look at their world. And so we're talking about how Karbi, Dimasa, and Khasi communities, they look at the different animals and the plants that they live with, and not necessarily in a romanticized way. There are relationships that are based on repulsion, fear, and all of those things, not just care and love and all of that. So in the first chapter, the first chapter after methodology, we try to talk about that. And then after that, we try to bring in how women fit into this, women's specific experiences, ecological experiences, and specific gendered ways of navigating through at their everyday duties. And then towards the end, we talk about how, liberalization and the coming in of markets has changed a lot within society in terms of women's gender roles and the community at large.
That, I mean, it's interesting that both of you have focused on how this work is trying, or it's an attempt at developing this alternative discourse on the indigeneity and indigenous. And maybe my next query could be about that, about the nuances, the small examples and all. So even our audience will know what exactly it is that you were focusing on. Basically, your ethnography, right? What are the examples that you could share? Who are, like, it's I mean, what I found very interesting about your book was, in between your critical analysis, you were also able to bring out these stories. So maybe you could tell us more about uh, who are these storytellers that is there. I mean, both of you are also storytellers, but it's a collaborative work, right? So you have Dimasas and Karbis actively giving you their stories, willingly sharing it with you. So maybe we can have some bit of that as well. But before that, I think my question to you would be, like, give us a little bit more, maybe a more in-depth understanding of what is this indigenous epistemology that you are talking about in the text. Like, how are you framing it? How are you conceptualizing it? Because Dejna, you have already said, no, like there is this academic discourse on quote unquote tribals and indigenous, which you felt was not a good representation, right? And that's why that vacuum is there, and you wanted to fill in that gap. Like, how is it that indigenous researchers, how do they represent their community? So which brings me back to my question again: what is this indigenous? Who are the indigenous? Like, how is your work in defining or framing this different from, let's say, other works on indigeneity? Maybe you could give us a little bit, like, how you have used it basically in your text. And maybe from that, I want both of you a little bit to highlight on your ethnography itself. Okay, give us uh, like the community, the area, the location, the villages, the markets that you're talking about. Maybe briefly you could just share with us about that as well.
Uh, so from the beginning of the project itself, because we were working with indigenous communities, and I am myself Dimasa, so it was important for me to talk about indigenous knowledge practices when it comes to conservation, because there is plenty, even if it does not fit into the a scientific definition of conservation. And we employed indigenous methodology or epistemology because I think we are at a time when there is a lot of appropriation happening uh, of indigenous lands and indigenous ways of knowing, indigenous culture. So this claim to indigeneity is a way to uh, push back these forces and claim space for ourselves, especially within academia, because our knowledge systems are so unique and so I mean create space for our way of knowing the world. And so when we talk about indigeneity globally, of course, like there are very distinct specificities in our culture, in our knowledge system. There is a lot of difference in like our political experiences also, if you compare it to indigenous peoples in America, in Canada, across the world. But then there are also very important similarities in our experiences. And so I think we can we can borrow from that methodology to empower ourselves. And I mean, we also dealt with this question, how does this framework empower communities in Northeast India? Um, so in this book, what we tried to do is, uh, so we don't want to compare Western Western knowledge with indigenous knowledge. We don't want to do that, and we don't want to romanticize indigenous knowledge systems either, because they are flawed and they are adaptive, and it's more about making space for an alternate kind of like knowledge system. In our work, we borrow a lot from authors like Linda Smith, like Sean Wilson, and all these amazing indigenous scholars around the world. And we mainly thought of using this methodology because we knew that we were talking about ecology, and this is very much tied with uh, oral knowledge and oral stories. And then yeah, so because we talked about that a lot, and yeah, so I think Nipasa can talk about the methodology so that,
Yeah.
it brings out, it makes more sense of this methodology that we use.
So, like Dejna has already mentioned, and like so orality. So when we talk about indigenous, if we talk about how we carried out the research in the field, the ethnography. So one of the main things that we tried to employ was again indigenous methodology. And so when we say indigenous methodology, what is it? What is it about? So there we mainly focused on the orality, the oral histories that are around the communities that they. I mean, now there is a lot of formalized writings, documentation, and everything happening, but still, then there is a lot of nuances in these oral stories that go around. So I think one of the distinct features that we found was that, so suppose so suppose I'm in part A of West Karbi Anglong. If I go to part B, I will hear the same story. Maybe the ending is the same, but then there will be different characters included. There will be different um, elements.
Interpolations,
Yeah,
yeah.
relations will be different, but the end, the moral of the story would be the same.
Mm.
And in a lot of places, the persons themselves have told us that if you go to the next village, you will find a different version of it. But that does not mean that the story A is a better one, or story A is more truer than story B. It has nuances in itself. So that is what we have tried to bring about in our findings also, basically contextualizing the findings within the philosophy and cosmologies of the communities. And
Mm.
also, I would just want to point out that even though in the book we have mentioned that we have worked on 3 communities, our fieldwork was mainly done in West Karbi Anglong and Dima Hasao. We did pilot study in East Khasi Hills, and the data from East Khasi Hills is drawn from that pilot study and through secondary literature. We could not, due to time constraints and due to budgetary constraints also, we could not go to East Khasi Hills. But more or less, we have tried to, we have attempted to include their, perspectives as well, but not very much in a lengthier way like we have done in West Karbi Anglong. And so if I again if I have to again about indigenous methodologies, I think another important aspect of it is that we have to understand that there is a history of there is a history of colonialism, of patriarchy, of capitalism that has time and again had an effect on how people have experienced their lives in these regions. So that is another thing that we have tried to incorporate along with looking at the narratives from feminist political ecology point of view. So that we have put gender in the middle of it, but then we also acknowledge that there are a lot of factors such as temporality, speciality, even class, political politics and everything which combines and leads to people experiencing things in different ways. And if I have to talk about the location, then in Dima Hasao, our base was Haflong, but then we went to villages like There, Sampari Disa, Gunjung, and Umrangso as well. Umrangso and in and around Umrangso. In West Karbi Anglong, our base was in Hamren. And we went around the Assam Meghalaya border, also Umswai, Ulukunchi, and also we had field workers in each of these areas. One of our field workers is here today. Naishadi is here today. She was our field worker in Dima Hasao, and I think yeah that. And our participants, if I have to talk like you asked, who are these storytellers? Most of these storytellers were women. We interacted with about, I think, 80% of our participants were women. Both formal and informal conversations happened. And these were women who worked in the Jhum lands. They were farmers. And some of them also were vendors who used to sit in the local daily markets. And we also, so to understand the gender differences, of course, we also talked to the men. But comparatively, women were at the fore of the study. And if so one particular thing that I would want to make a note of here is that, so when this was like a opening, sometimes when you're in the field, it happens that some things happen and you are like, you go into you go into questioning, your positionality as well. So this was one of the incidents where in West Karbi Anglong, me and my field worker Humphrey, we were interacting with one of these farmers, and we were talking about her land, her what does she do, how does she what sort of relationships she has with her land, her homestead and everything. So at that point of time, she told me like, uh, she called me Bhonti, and she was like, Bhonti, day after day you guys come, researchers are coming to our place, you guys ask us questions, we answer them. Every time you come approach us, we answer them thoroughly, but and every time you come to us, you tell us that this will benefit us, but nothing of that sort happens. I am answering your questions, I am giving you whatever you're asking me from, but at the end of the day, what is coming back to me? And that sort of stayed with me. And because I think what happens is, like I said, these are women who are farmers, so, and they don't have a lot of time. Even when we went to the field, it was when we had to talk to them, we went to the field at around 5 in the morning, 6 in the morning. We had to talk to them while they were working. They have no time for themselves. But still, in between all this, they still made time for us. And so when we talk about going to the field, when we talk about talking to indigenous communities, rural women who are so busy in their work, in their survival, it becomes important to come back to the question of, as academicians, yes, we are doing research, we are going to the field, we are doing this, but what comes to the end of this for them? So that is briefly about the ethnography that we conducted.
Yeah, I think that's an important question. Maybe we can address it towards the end, no? Because your title says imagine futures. So whose future are you talking about? But obviously, different women, and they must have had different experiences. But maybe you could tell us a little bit about this world that you are you are writing about. Like, is there a can you walk us through what these women do, like from morning till evening? There, you like Nipasha, you mentioned that they have no time, rightly so, because they have to do a lot of work, not and that work goes beyond just the household, right? Because both of you have given examples of the foraging, and obviously that's where the whole arguments come from. So not to generalize, but can you just give us a brief, like, peek into the lives of this woman, like day in and day out? What is it that they do, and how do they go about their daily lives, their domestic and outside work, chores, practices, etc. And I maybe when you do that, if you could tell us, because I think it was Dejna who mentioned this effective uh, relations that they have with the multi-species world. So maybe a little bit about that as well. Like if you can elaborate on these animals, plants, spiritual entities, because you gave examples of that also, and how the women and the men, they have their own perceptions and about the relationship with this. And again, adding on to that, the last question here in this, we have more questions, but just for this particular conversation, if you can tell us if there is any similarity between the two communities, or based on your age, it was very distinct. Like the Dimasas and the Karbis have lived close to each other for like centuries, right? So there has to be somewhere that you can find a commonality between these two very very important and old culture in the region. So maybe through again your examples, you could tell us whether it is through their folklore or their food practices or their method of cultivation, foraging, whatever examples you could find. If there are commonalities or differences or uniqueness, maybe you could highlight those points as well. Yeah.
Maybe I'll start with the similarity and the difference and comparing the two tribes because I found it so intriguing that the word Mandu, which is the word for the field hut, is similar in both languages. I mean, it's the same word. It's Mandu in both languages. And so I started from there and I started to compare the Jhum practices and the Jhumlands in the two communities. And it's very apparent that there has been a long history of inter-community exchange in terms of seed conservation and seed exchange and folklore exchange. There are Karbi people abundant in Dimasa stories, and I'm sure Dimasa characters are abundant in Karbi stories as well. And very interestingly, in Hamren, we met uh, a woman, an SHG worker, and I think it was Basapi.
Icon Timonpi.
Oh wait,
Yeah.
yeah, this
Yeah.
icon. But so she was saying how Daula Gufus have a different surname in Karbi. So Daula Gufu people within Dimasa community and that clan within the Karbi community are the same people basically. And there were many things like that. And in the Dimasa fields as well, there are a lot of vegetables with the suffix pana. Pana is Karbi in our language. So there is a cucumber variety called Thaishum pana. And there are many other subspecies like that. So it is very clear that communities have exchanged seeds, knowledge, practices, etc. across generations. And of course, there are contentions. We know that there is violence and there is conflict, but I think it's very important to talk about these stories as well. We also came across stories of, I mean, exchange of Jhum paraphernalia, the baskets, and the different, things that are used in the Jhum among Dimasa and Zeme. We have many stories about Dimasa and Zeme, bonds. We know about the story of Shemkhor, many stories like that. And then, as well as the Rangkhol community, Rangkhol and the Dimasa community exchanging goods, knowledge. And then there was one particular story in Gunjung, not a story, just a recalling. So we spoke to the Khunang, the Gambura of Gunjung, and he was talking about how there is a treaty between the Zeme and the Dimasa. It's called Bumasa Khaba, which means that when during times of crisis or when there is a famine or a drought, Dimasas would find shelter in Zeme homes and Zeme would find shelter in Dimasa homes. That was the treaty. And I think that is lovely, and we should talk more about these stories. Um, yeah. Uh, what was the first question?
Time geography of the women.
Oh, okay. Do you want to take that, Nipasa?
Maybe you can share one of Dimasa women, and then I can take of a Karbi
Okay.
women. Then we can,
Okay,
yeah.
sure. So as Nipasa said, we were working with really busy women at peak harvest time as well, because our field work was during September, October, right? Till December, we
In
were in
December.
and out of the field. So, I mean, at many instances, we met people who were like, please go away. We have so much to do. We don't have time for this. There were also people who were very generous, who invited us into their mandu, cooked for us, shared their lunches with us. And it was especially the older generation who were like more excited to talk to us. They were excited to share their stories. And I mean, a lot of them were like, uh, yeah, it's so good that you are documenting our stories. And not many young people, they care about the stories anymore. We don't have our grandchildren around us. So we're happy that you're writing about us and our lives. Um, so talking about the women, they, I'll talk about Jhum farmer. So in Sampari Disa, I met the wife of the shaman. And so being the wife of a shaman also comes with a lot of bearings, responsibilities. Usually the husband and wife, they work together in the fields, but because men usually have to take on their societal roles. Someone is a gambura, someone is a hojai. So when women live in households like that, they usually have to take more on. But there are also, I mean, groups like the Yawete Leba group. Minal talks about it in her book, Intimate
Inheritance.
Inheritance. Yeah, so there are labor repositories and different traditions that help with labor. I mean, that organize labor effectively in June fields. So women, they rely on these groups of 5 or 7 women. They go together to the fields early morning around, say, 5:30. But then that's not when their day starts. They wake up way earlier to, cook for the family, clean, whatever else that is there to do in the household. They do that, and then they leave with their group of friends. They mentioned that this group is also very important for their work. It's not just a group that works together, it's also uh, a space of respite. And this group is not only for the June fields, it transposes into like SHG group sometimes and Hazira group sometimes. So this is a lifelong like relationship. And so they go on to the June together. What Depending on the season, the work actually depends on the season. The sowing and the harvest seasons are the most busy seasons. And then they spend their day in the fields. Every day is different for them. There is a lunch time in between, and women sit together. Again, sometimes there is judima, so other times there is not. Sometimes they cook chicken. Most of the times it's vegetables from fresh produce from the fields itself. And then around 4 or 5, they wrap things up, and then they head back home. They have to do their household chores again. They're usually the last ones to go to sleep as well. So, uh, during the time that we went, because it was the harvest season, this was mostly their routine. If maybe we went during the other seasons in the beginning of the cycle, or other seasons, maybe they would not have spent the whole day in the Jhum fields. Maybe they would have gone for a little visit and come back to weave or do their other work. Yeah. And then they also go to the forest to forage. Everyone's, I mean, in a week they would go around alternately to the forest. And for some people, the forests are far. For some, it's closer, depending on how far the forests are. And then, yeah, there's also for harvesting from their homesteads. This is all part of women's work. Nipasa?
Yeah. So more or less, the routine for Karbi women while they go to their Zoomlands is more or less the same. So I would just to point out the differences. So I would like to highlight the routine of the woman wherever staying. Basically the Khuri of the host family. So what? So she brewed hor. Hor is the local alcohol of the Karbi people. So like the main task for her was to brew the hor. So she would usually wake up around 3 in the morning. She would wake up and then she would cook early in the morning. She will cook for the family, and then she will also tend to the chickens and the pigs that are there. And then from around 4:30 onwards, she will be so there is a small a hut sort of a structure in the backyard. So she will go there, she will brew the alcohol, whatever necessary steps are to be done for the day, she will do that. Around 5 or 5:30, again she will come out, she will do the other household chores, and then she will go around the um, so in the backyard they have a garden. They have a, kitchen garden. She will go around the garden. She will take a lap of it, and then she will make note of the things that have ripened, or a plant that has maybe that needs more tending. So she will make a note of that. And then once, then again she'll come and have breakfast. She will tend to some other household chore, and then she'll go out. She'll go out. She has a group of people. So there are. There are these women who she goes out with. They mostly it's sort of an SSG sort of a thing only. So she will go out, she will do whatever thing she has to. Then again, she'll come back. She'll come back. She'll again tend to the pigs, chickens, and everything. So, like when what Dejnath said, no, about effective relationships that women have. So I think that is these are sort of the relationships that happen on an everyday basis. Like even when they go foraging, so it's similar. So like 4 or 5 women around the neighborhood, they will form a group. They will go to forage. While foraging, if suppose they see that a plant is needs more care, so they will not from for that day they will not particularly pluck from that plant, and they will look for other plants nearby. And for Karbi people, Hanthu and Mehak are two important herbs that they consume on a daily basis. So when they forage, they usually pick these herbs. And so that is so when we say effective relationships, so these are sort of the relationships that the women have with the, so these are pathways which they regularly or on alternative basis they go to. They see that maybe this plant needs more care, maybe this um, suppose in their homestead, suppose this chicken needs more tending or something like that. So those are sort of the relationships that they carry along. And there were also women who have told us that because they bonded more with a certain pig or a chicken, they would not butcher it, or they would not let the family members sell it off, because also most of the times when they form these relationships, they give some sort of a name to these animals, so that it becomes more uh, it becomes a part of their family.
All
So
them.
so a lot of the time they have also shared these stories where it has been difficult for them to part ways with them, and then they let them just be in their homesteads, in their homes. So these are sort of the effective relationships that have time and again been built by these women. And not just animals that they have kept in their homes willingly, but so in the home where I was staying, so they had a gecko.
Mm.
Uh, so there was a gecko, and Dejna was quite scared of it when we were there. She was refusing to even go and have a look at it. I had to click a picture of it and show it to her. Ki, see, this is the gecko. So they let these animals live in their spaces. So the gecko has a certain space for itself in their home, and they will not go and disturb it. The gecko has laid its eggs and everything, and they're like, we will not go and disturb it because now it's his space. It is her space now. For so these are sort of the effective relationships that we talk about in the book of, and also how most of these relationships also are there in the folk tales of that are there in the communities. So when we talk about conservation, um, I mean, of course, it would not fit into the direct scientific definition of what conservation is. But then there are these nuances that we have found. And it's not just about preserving for the future, it's also carrying along what has been there in the past, mixing it up with what is in there here in the there in the present, and then taking care of it for the future. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's very interesting actually, like how these women, their livelihood practices and obligations are actually tied to this micro conservation practices. I want to know whether the women themselves see it in that sense, or is it something that you, both of you, have applied it after, based on your own worldview and based on your own knowledge, like this preservation or care that you are talking about? Do the women themselves see it that way, or for them it is just an ordinary daily acts that they do anyway? Like, is how, like, that is one thing that I would want to know. Yeah, I think let's address this question, then we'll move on to this issue, the political issue of conservation after this, since it has already come up. So maybe quickly, both of you can just comment on this.
Yeah, so of course, not every woman have this consciousness that they are conserving something or preserving something. But in West Karbi Anglong, what has happened is IFAD and NARCOMP, these are organizations which have actively played a part in letting people know what conservation is. And they have taught through their various programs, they have taught, especially in Ulukunchi and Umswai, like near the Assam Meghalaya border. They have taught not only women, but the men of the community as well, how to preserve certain plants or species that are dying because of development projects, because of building roads and everything. So of course there are some women who have actively said that they are doing this for to preserve it, but then there are some women who do it as a as a daily ritual without thinking of it as conservation as such.
I think there is awareness, there is active conversation about how the resources around us are finite. There is a story in the book where a lady from Gunjung, she talks about a folk tale um, where they say that the day the uh, baby chick will develop a disease, and I mean, the day the world ends will be the day that the baby chicken sheds all of its hair. The land will look like that, and it will be devoid of any plants, any living thing, and it will look like that chicken basically,
Mm.
that has shed all its hair. So I think there is, uh, people know, indigenous people are aware that they need to conserve, they need to protect, they have to extract carefully, and they have to make sure things survive for the future generations. But conservation is not done separately from everyday life. They do not go out of their way to establish reserve forests and
Mm.
conservation spaces. They do it in their everyday acts because everything they do is connected with the ecology.
Mm.
Be it be it accessing water, accessing food, uh, anything at all. They live within forests, so everything this knowledge is embedded, and these
Mm.
practices are embodied. In our book, we talk about we categorize interactions with the environment and conservation into two categories. So one is the everyday way of conserving, which is maybe through replanting forest species into homesteads and working with the seasons when it comes to hunting, all of those everyday practices. And then the other one is customary, like traditional practices of conservation. Like Nipasa talked about the daiko. Uh, Humiabi is here. She has worked extensively with daikos, and we have borrowed a lot from her work. So daikos would qualify as uh, conservation, going out of the way, like other than the everyday practices. And the taboos that we practice in Dimasa community, the Alu Daiko, which includes the Daulagufus and the Nunisas and the other and the other clans, they practice taboo of not eating pork and not eating the leaf. We call it mijen. I think it's michinga. So there are some taboos like that even in the Karbi society. uh, there is a clan that uh, does not hunt the hornbill, and then there is another that does not hunt the falcons, Amur falcons. So there are those practices as well that are other than the everyday practices. So yeah, I think that uh, people are very much aware of how finite resources are.
Uh, yeah. Which brings me to the next question, because we are already here in the territory of conservation, and both of you have clearly shown through your text about conservation being a daily life practice and nothing that is external to how these women they live their lives on a day-to-day basis. No, so how do you think this model is different from the policy imposed conservation? Okay, like that idea of the state led model. And I want, if possible, because uh, Dejna, you said you have worked on Jhum cultivation, so the issue of land alienation, everything is very, very very, very critical right now, especially when we're talking about the changing landscape in Northeast. So where do you see the intersection? Like I'm talking about the increasing commercial uh, agriculture and plantation based activities. I'm talking about infrastructural development that is happening, whether it is for industrialization or tourism, which is what is happening in most of the six schedule areas. And where do you see this conservation issue, like all three of them, no? How do they come together, like the state, the market, and the ecology? So if maybe Nipasha could start, or whichever, like Deshna, either of you can just maybe give us insight into what you feel about this and what does your field tell you, like the field.
I
Okay,
think
maybe
Dejna
I'll.
can take this question. Yeah, yeah.
Um, so dominant voice, the dominant discourse places uh, people outside of these ecological areas to say that, oh, conservation requires people to be not in contact with the ecology. We see the example of Kuno National Park. So many examples how people are separated from the land to, you know, uh, to say that, I mean, this urban elitist way of looking at conservation positions people as indigenous people as the destroyers, the ones who destruct. But we have to keep in mind who this benefits. We have to think about who are the agents that are pushing for this kind of conservation. We talk about the Amur falcon in Umrangso, and how Amur falcon, the bird, has become a charismatic entity, and how this has played a role in bringing in ecotourism and filling the treasury of the district council. So there are different ways in which conservation is used as a smokescreen for other like state industrial aspirations. In terms of Jhum, um, we are a people that have been dependent on Jhum for subsistence, for everything. Our food system is embedded in Jhum. It is a multi-cropping system where we not only grow rice, but we grow vegetables, seed oils, we rear silkworms. It is uh, it is very biodiverse. But then it depends on community ownership. So, which is an eyesore for power centers because commons are more difficult to appropriate. And we know that since uh, since the colonial period, Jhum and shifting cultivation, Padaing as we call it, it has been disincentivized, and the disincentivization has only intensified post-independence. And today we see that developmental projects are coming in. Uh, Take the example of the Asom Mala, which had been in the news for a long time. And in Umrangso is full of these industries, cement industries. We heard about the rat hole mining incident. So what these so to make way for these industries, it becomes important to first uh, convert commons into private lands. And so we see that, I mean, not only in these very direct and very visible ways, but in other ways as well, there is a push for converting commons into private lands. We see the coming in of plantations. In the 1990s, the coffee plantations came into Dima Hasao. On the way from Lanka to Haflong, we see many ghost coffee plantations in around Gunjung. These are all remnants of that 1990s coffee plantation craze. But they had to be abandoned because there wasn't a good market for these for coffee. And today what we see is, despite the protection uh, under the sixth schedule in these districts, like all three districts that we worked in our six schedule districts, despite these protections, we see that there are ways of circumventing these provisions. And there is a lot of land alienation happening in all three districts, which means the loss of commons. And this has direct implication on, uh, I mean, women, first of all, because they are the primary stakeholders. They are taking care of the Jhum. They have been taking care of the commons. With privatization, with conversion of these commons into, say, plantations or cash cropping spaces, the pattas, the land deeds, they go to the men because they are the assumed heads of their households. When the lands were commons, there was no owner. So there was no way of, claiming the land as men. But now the ownership, uh, it is normalized that the owner is the man, and but the labor is the woman's. And then there is a gradual feminization of Jhum subsequently, and these plantations are taken care of by men. This also has, again, implications on how women's access to land, women's land rights. Um, yeah, so that's what's happening. But then I think there are differences between that process, how that process is unraveling in Karbi Anglong and Dima Hasao, as well as the Khasi Hills. I think in Dima Hasao, the process is just starting now. While in Karbi Anglong, I think it's well on its way. And West Khasi Hills, a lot has already happened. In Karbi Anglong, now we see the case of the Azure Solar Power Company that has taken over a large area of land, and there are people on the streets protesting now. A lot a large portion of that land was also Jhum land commons. Yeah, Nipasa, maybe you can talk about uh, your field.
So I think so. I would just like to make so when these developments are happening, when privatization is also happening, it's also a question of like when we are so suppose when we are growing things, when we are switching to maybe plantations, it also becomes a question of why we are doing it and whom we are doing it for. So suppose in the Jhum lands, the cultivation that was done, it was mainly for the sake of the family, or even somewhere, to for selling purposes. But then now with the market entering into these places, what is happening is again most of the things that are now grown is also from the perspective of the selling point of view, like um, which plants or which vegetables or which sort of I'm not getting the word.
Crops, do you mean
Anyway,
crop?
yeah, crops. Yes.
Right.
Sorry. Yeah. So, what sort of crops are grown and how and who is growing it? So, basically, when the shift is done from Jhum to plantations, again it comes from a point of view that women so in Karbi Anglong what is happening is a lot of the women are not allowed to plow the land. So again there is a gap in what is known as the knowledge transmission also. So it will go on from men to men, and it will not come down to the women. So what will then the women do? So that these are also some of the questions that we have to ask, like what now. And uh, in terms of like I would like when we are talking about loss of commons and everything, it also brings upon questions of now who are the knowledge holders and what will happen to the way the knowledge has been transmitted all these years. So I think these also come about, and we have addressed them in the book, but there is a need to also bring upon the similarities and differences that are happening across Northeast region, across the Northeast. So I think, yeah, that is what I would like to comment on this.
I think both of you have highlighted some of the things that still needs to be done. Like there is so much scope for understanding the experiences of the indigenous community. I will ask just one more question, and then I feel like I owe it to our audience to also to interact with you. And my final question to both of you would be, of course, the title of the book itself, right? I know in through your example, like through our conversation, a little bit, you have been able to talk about what conservation means for these women, what the future holds, like from their own understanding. But yeah, so but how do you think this book actually illustrates the concept of the imagined future? That's what that would be my final question, right? So like what are the significant lessons that even the readers can take away from this text, no, and the title itself? So yeah, I don't
Should
it
I
is
take?
I hope the question makes sense, right?
No, it's a perfect question. Should I take this one, Nips?
Yeah, yeah. I'll add on to it.
Okay. Yeah, you can add, yeah. So first of all, we like the ring to this title. So we try to, yeah, so we try this, we actually developed the name of this book towards the very end. We had written the book first, and then I don't know how others write books, but that's how we like chose our title. And it made sense to us because we met a lot of people from different age groups, from different backgrounds, and they had different aspirations for their futures. Um, Say when we spoke to elders, they held their traditions and these practices very close to their heart, and they did not want to part with, say, their Jhum lands. When we posed questions like, what do you think the future of Jhum looks like? they would say, of course, it will continue happening. How can we part with it? It's like so entangled with our culture. Um, yeah, but when we spoke to like younger people, they had a lot of dreams and aspirations. They were thinking of moving to the urban centers. Their priorities were different. They had to educate their children. They had to, think of uh, other ways to, for income generation, other alternatives. So they were more inclined towards the idea of plantations and cash cropping and experimenting with Joom. And so and then again, women had different aspirations, men had different aspirations. Youngsters, they had completely different aspirations. A lot of young people uh, thought it was unnecessary to do Joom. And the next thing to do, I mean, the next step would be to, you know, settle in the towns. That is the next step in that ladder towards like progress, social mobility. So yeah, different sets of aspirations, and people imagine their ecologies also very differently. Um, a lot of women also like wanted to give up June because it was so, I mean, they had to work so hard. Yeah, a lot of different conflicting, imaginations of the future. So we thought this would be like a good title to sum up everything in the book.
Also, like even if the younger generation, like I would say most of them did say that, later on we would choose to move out of these places and move to urban centers. But like what was interesting to see was that they were not devoid of what was happening around them. They knew uh, what is happening and why is happening, why is it happening, and also like a not a lot of these knowledge, right? Be it brewing or be it what happens in the Joom fields. I mean, it's mostly theoretical now for them, but it's not like they do not know how these how the Joom cultivation happens or how the process of brewing happens. Like when I talked to a lot of these young women, like young girls who are in their who are now finding jobs to do, they were all interested in they were definitely interested in continuing the processes, but then the question comes up, what about better opportunities, what about a life outside of these places? So yeah, like Dejna said, like a lot of different perspectives. And when we went to the elders would just complain, nowadays the youngsters are not at all interested in knowing things. And also in both of these places there are these youth groups in the Joom fields. A lot of people also talked about how, these groups are becoming less and less day by day. So uh, somewhere or the other, the
There's
process
labor
through which,
also.
yeah, it's also becoming less and less. So I think keeping in mind all of these things, we thought of this title.
Thank you so much. I think that really answers what like I was curious about, and it also speaks a lot to the. I mean, like both of you said, no, it's not a very. I mean, there is a tenacity to how these women they live their lives, but there is also an uncertainty to this future, no, which is out of their control, and I think that is the case for so many other communities that are at very vulnerable stages, of this whatever is happening in the region. And that vulnerability is not just ecological, it can come through a lot of other dimensions as well. So I will put a pause on myself for now, and I will open up floor for discussion. Um, yeah. So please, thank you so much to all the audience for being here, so patient. If you have any comments, if you have any queries, please, I think, or anything that I'm sure I have left out so many other questions and so many other points. I please welcome your I welcome your comments and invite you to interact with Dejna and Nipasha directly. Yeah, so.
If there is no one else, then maybe I can start off
Yes, Kapil, hi.
with due
Please.
permission.
Yes, please.
Hello, good evening. Good evening. Yeah, first of all, I would like to congratulate Dejna and Nipasa for publishing a book. It's not very easy publishing a book, and that too with a very interesting work that they have come up with. So congratulations on that, and I'm sure it will have a very good impact on further studies that may happen with through them or through any other scholars. Um, I don't know if I might have missed out in the beginning of the session since I was offline for a few minutes. Like, are we able to see the hard copy of the book? Like, if any of them can show, like, I just want to see the.
Kapil, we lost you over there. Can you
I
just
think he got disconnected.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I just came back. I think I got disconnected in the middle.
Yeah. Can you just repeat your question, Kapil?
Yeah, and it was not a question. It's actually my first query was a request. I wanted to see the copy of the book if the authors can just show the how the book looks like.
Oh,
I was about to say I also have
yeah.
it here. I
Can
don't know
you
if
see?
like this. Oh, it doesn't.
Yes. Uh, yeah, well, the cover looks really interesting.
Maybe we
Again,
can ping
congratulations on that.
Nipasa or
Yeah,
something.
so we have so in the cover we have tried to, so this is so this is the castor plant. This is the fish
Rambutan.
mint. Yeah. This is the fish mint,
Rambutan.
and here is the brinjal plant. So we have tried to
Okay.
yeah.
It was just out of my own curiosity. I wanted to see the book. Like, it's really attractive to look at. And I hope many people will have a copy of these in their hands, including myself. So about that, I can ask later. Uh,
It's available on Amazon.
We should credit
okay,
Stephen.
sure.
Stephen
Yeah.
is the designer of the book. Stephen Kongsai. Yeah, he
Okay,
did a great job on the cover.
okay.
Also, we have
So,
illustrations inside the book as well.
Yeah.
Wanted to point it out.
okay, so that's a good book with a good content. So definitely I'll get a copy of mine. Anyways, coming to my query, like it's not something very hardcore or something, but myself, I'm involved in fieldworks. Like I've been involved in fieldworks at almost all the districts of Assam, and currently I'm surveying the field. And I remember Dejna pointing out like what was the point of, villagers often ask, like nowadays so many people come and ask questions, and then like they go back. And I think um, maybe by coincidence, I came across a few people, I guess, in Dimah South district in the villages of Gunjung and in the market areas of Umrangso or something, maybe where you reached before me for questioning some of the people, and in turn, like they somehow let me know that there were some young scholars who came and also interacted, and uh, most of them look for incentive. I don't know if I think you might
Yes.
have come in the field across that. Most of them look for incentive, and it's always difficult to refuse them as well. So that's one thing which we always come across as a field worker. And I think some projects must include incentives for the person whom we interact with in the future. Just in case, I'm just giving my opinion here. I may be wrong. However, I want to know from like both of you, like forest and fields, when you said in the title. forest and fields? Like, what did you include in the forest and what did you include in the fields?
Yeah, so in our field, I mean, we have the same experiences, and it's justified also because we're asking for people's time, especially like farmers who are like so busy. So, I mean, we also uh, encountered a lot of instances when they, of course, questioned what they were getting out of it, and they're mostly used to like agents from the ADC, the council, and the government visiting, campaigning during elections, and also they're used to receiving incentives monetarily as well. So they sometimes mistake us for these like state agents, and they respond in that way. But then we clarify that I mean we're poor researchers and we don't have anything to give except like I mean, our questions. And maybe like we try to explain what the point of our research is and what we're trying to do. And in most cases, they see meaning in our work and they share their time with us. Um, but I mean, we also try to uh, offer we always went with something in our hands to show our respect for them. Maybe like even if it's packets of biscuit or tea, they appreciate that, and I think that is a good practice as well. Um, yeah. What was your other question? I keep forgetting the second question.
Uh, yeah, I agree to your points. And the other question I wanted to know was in your title, you have mentioned forest and fields. So, what did you take into consideration as forest and as fields?
Okay. Um, we were talking about the Zoom fields when we said fields and forests. Of course, the forests where they foraged and where they, it was forests were not just places to obtain food. They were also places where women went to for like socializing, sitting together. We mentioned it in our book. Like there were instances in violent homes where women would, see forest as a place of respite and security. And these are spaces of, these are livelihood spaces, but not just that, they are filled with meanings for women. The June feels, like I said, it's not just a place where they grow food. It's a place where women sit with each other, talk about their families, their struggles, their sorrows. And there are these labor traditions, uh, reciprocity, yawai labor, and not just for women, also for men and children. When it's time for sowing. There is the Gajaibao, in whose fields everybody comes to work. There is music. There is karam muri. Judima is brewed in a corner, and a pig is slain, and there is a feast. All of these, sensory connections. All of these memories, and yeah. So these fields and forests are filled with meanings, and that is what we mean when we mention that in our title.
Just to add to Dejna's point, like when we talk about when we talk about the forest and fields becoming a places of respite, it's also important to understand that when we talk about women's work, it happens in a continuum. Like we have these discussions now about the separation between paid work and unpaid work, but most often these lines are very blurred. It mixes up, and in these spaces we did see that leisure for women might not be as definitive as how the word comes in, like for us, maybe because we live in urban centers, we can definitely time it out from this point of time to this point of time I did something which can be called as leisure. But for them, I think between their livelihood works, leisure itself is mixed. And Yeah, when we talk about these forests and fields, they did like Desha mentioned, it's not just livelihood. It forms other basically these spaces also become no meaning makings of. There are different types of meaning makings that happen in these places.
Thank you. I actually am very intrigued by this work that you have presented and through the discussion, Madam Pamidi also. And in fact, what was intriguing for me was like, you're also, I guess you're also interrelating folklore as a means for conservation of forest. So can you give a little bit insight on this?
Can you repeat your question? Your voice was a bit.
Okay. Like I was asking, like folklore. You have made a lot of mention about folklore. So folklore and conservation of forest are something which I never like came to know before, which could be related or which could be put together in a particular topic and be presented. So I just wanted to get few insights, maybe with some examples or anything like on how you manage to relate folklore of the tribals, like document folklore of the tribals, and point it out towards conservation of forest.
Mhm. Okay, so I will share the story of the gooseberry with you. In the book we talk about in Sampari Disa, we met somebody whose father was a healer. Uh, so this story of the gooseberry in their family was like very revered, and they really followed the taboo and everything. So uh, so there is a saying among our tribe that um, expectant parents or parents of children below the age of who are still young and vulnerable, they should never cut a gooseberry tree or harm a gooseberry tree, because the spirit that takes care of children, infants, it resides in a gooseberry tree. And um, there is a ritual where two gooseberries, when they are adjacent to each other, one is wrapped with a risha and the other one is wrapped with maybe a rijampine or a woman's clothing to make them represent a male and a female, and then they're married to each other. And this is a ritual to ensure that these uh, trees take the responsibility of the parents of the child, that for whom the ritual is being conducted. So yeah, this is a very popular story among the Dimasa. And then there are other stories like the story of the pangolin. So there is a folklore that goes like, there were a bunch of women who were foraging, and one of them was pregnant. So on their way back home, she was the last one in the group, and she had to deliver right then, and her friends had gone before her. And uh, she had uh, she had dug the soil and she had delivered her baby there, but then she had to rush away from that place for some reason. So this child that was not taken care of but was birthed uh, into the ground became a pangolin. And so women are not supposed to eat the meat of pangolin. And there are many stories like that. Um, yeah, so like I said, through uh, these stories kind of, support, kind of, that is, they guide a lot of taboos in our society, which are maintained. And in a way, this is a way of conservation. There are other stories also tied to, hunting practices that say that this season is not the right season to hunt a particular kind of animal. because of, like, again, another story connected to it. And if you look at it scientifically also, uh, hunting is usually done in the winter seasons, because in the summers, in the warmer seasons, uh, this is the season of breeding and proliferation. So culling, hunting, all of those things are done in the winters. And I mean, people are hunters, and communities are aware of the seasonal cycles, again tied to stories. So yeah, lots of examples.
Also, also at times, like when we are saying that there are certain taboos in the communities, it might also not lead to, I mean, of course, most of the time it might lead to conservation, but then it might not as well. So, so among the Karbis, there is a tree. It's called the Alom Bilom tree. So it's a sacred tree for them, and not so you are supposed to keep part of the bark of the tree in your house for good health and prosperity and all of that. And for a long time, these trees were not cut, but now again, because of commercialization, and then wood is very expensive, and it's good for making furnitures and all, so people are cutting it now. So so again, uh, when there are also stories attached to how there are taboos around certain plant species, there are also uh, in today's time there are also these contradictions happening where people are going against these taboos and clearing out certain species for commercialization and selling purposes. Right?
Thank you so much. Like, it has been so insightful, knowing about whatever has been discussed, and very interesting. And I really congratulate once again to all the authors. And I hope that we all continue to, collaboratively work like that towards conservation as well. Thank you for the good work. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kapil. I mean, I think the last point that Nipasha said directly leads us to this question, which it's there on the chat box. If you want to take a look at it, I think it's from Shivraj. Otherwise, I will also read it out for you. So Shivraj says, "Thank you for the talk. Like you had mentioned, many women and younger generation have different aspirations and want to move out of the traditional practices like Jhum. When that happens, does the conservational feeling stay or modernization ends it? Does their interaction with ecology change?" So
Yeah, I mean, huh.
maybe Nipasha could take the question, like
Yeah,
because you. Yeah.
yeah. Like I said, again, because of modernization, there is a certain shift among the communities as well. And when we talk about the younger generation, I think there is a difference in how they interact with the ecology, definitely, because if suppose you go to the field daily, if suppose you go for foraging even once a week, there is a certain knowing that happens through the road that you take, maybe, or even among the group that you go with, the experiences are definitely different. So when you don't engage in those practices, your meaning making of the same ecology would be very different. um, like suppose the host family that I was staying with. So the auntie was very, active in terms of going about to forage, or making a round in her homestead looking for ripened fruits or vegetables. That is not the same for her daughter. I mean, of course, maybe if her mother or father would ask her to go and pluck something from the backyard, she would do so. But then the experience is not the same like her mother, who would make it a point to go about her backyard every morning and to make note of the changes that is happening. So in that sense, the embodied knowledge that happens is also very different, and especially when you move to urban centers. And if we like if we take the example of Guwahati itself, uh, this green spaces are becoming less and less day by day. So in that sense, of course, when you come from a place where you are surrounded by forests and fields, and you come to a center where it's mostly roads and buildings. So in that sense, of course, your thinking of what the ecology is will also be different. So in that sense, I think again, it's I mean, I don't want to make it a generational thing, but then yeah, I think generation wise, the perspectives would be very, very different.
Dejna, do you want to add to this or?
So maybe, okay, so a very interesting that's happening within indigenous societies is there are revivalist movements also. Um, I mean, I want to think of it like a way to reconnect with one's ecology as well, because a lot of um, I mean, even when you see Christianity or um, even Hinduism, we have our own way as like Dimasa people or as Karbi people. We have our own way of looking at the ecology. A certain tree has a certain location in our worldview, in our cosmology, which are not represented, say, in the religions that we take on. So there is a counter movement that either that sometimes creates space like that uh within these religions, organized religions, or there are like completely new um ways of thinking, completely new ideologies. Uh, I mean, we can take the example of the Heraka movement among the Zeliangrong people or the Senkhasi movement in Meghalaya. Yeah, so there are a lot of counter movements as well, where people are trying to make sense and create new relationships in new ways with the ecology.
Hmm. Yeah, I think these are good illustrations of the arguments, no, that you have made. That's true. Um, I saw that Naishodi had like raised their hand. Do do does Naishodi want to, like, do you have a question or comment? We can take it now, or perhaps not.
Yeah,
Um,
hello. Okay. Good evening,
No,
all. Okay.
I
I just didn't know how to use this Zoom because I am habituated to that Google Meet and all. That's why. Okay. Good evening to you all. I just wanted to share some thoughts as a field worker in this project, and I'm very privileged to work with our associate researcher here, Dejna and Nipasa, whom I met last year or 2 years back, and it was very interesting. We had also fun, not only work and many things else, many funny incidents also, which I still think and sometimes smile about it. And uh, uh, although I was really already familiar with certain aspects of my culture, conducting fieldwork in Dima has allowed me to delve deeper and connect with elderly community members of our Dimasa, and they share very valuable folk tales. Personally, whatever struggles they have came across related to this Zoom cultivation and the significance of these traditional practices of our village economy. And I was very struck by the importance of Zoom cultivation and the impact of poor transportation infrastructure on the local economy. And furthermore, I was very surprised to discover the persistence of certain cultural beliefs and practices while also lamenting the loss of others, such as folklore that has been lost with the passing of our forefathers. And I can also say in Dimasa that we met so many elderly people whom we asked to narrate this folklore, but then they say that okhali sing sibaho haushi aju gobushi tharmai bamu butte thangla kha nya hari goboni tharmai du. So hearing those things, it is very sad. And even after completing this project, I still encounter many elderly people and women in the market who recognize me and ask about my well-being, and Dejna also. And also inquire about like if our book has published or not. And do you remember, Dejna, our Aju Humau Jala? Humau
Yeah.
Jala as in, yeah. We have met our one Aju grandfather who is a widower. Then he after losing his wife, he has no means of earning. So he used to go to the market come to the market of Haflong from Gunjung along with others women. So being
Yeah.
only a guy, I mean widower along with only along with the whole woman. That's why he is called Humaujala. Humau means the fermented cake, or what to say. I don't
Yeah,
know how to say
rice
that.
cake.
Yeah, that only. There maybe in the book it has been written, so others who would read then they might know it well. And also Aju used to call me. He called me one day asking about any book that has been published regarding this folk tales, because if there's any book, then he would like to gift to his grandchildren. But then I don't have that kind of any idea if there's any folktales, the Masa folktales book, so I couldn't update him regarding this. So this is the only thing that I wanted to share. And I'm very thankful for the experience of working at NESRC and would like to offer my assistance in future research endeavors in the Mahasa. Thank you.
Thank you, Naishadi.
Thank you.
Thank you, Naishodi. I think some of the points that you raised are so important. I'm sure there are works, I believe, on folklore and folktale. It may not be in English, but it'll be there in Assamese. Lot of Dimasa writers have actually written in Bengali and Assamese. So I think if we really dig deep, something will emerge. Like we have had a lot of literary writers also over the years, no? So, but yeah, like I think documentation of folk tales is important, and maybe we can have further discussions on that. Like the Dimasa Scholars League have so many amazing like researchers who are working in this domain as well. So I think something will come out of it. So yeah. Raki, I think has another question. So maybe
Yeah,
I hand
we'll
over
ask
to Raki.
that. Yeah, first of all, I think that the experience and the anecdote shared by Naishori, that was so beautiful. I mean, Humau Jala. That
Yes,
is
yes.
something I will take away from this entire discussion today. It's so cute. And yeah, even from my own field experiences back in Dimahasa, or be it here, even where I'm working right now in Gwalpara district, I think the people are so welcoming. Like, you just sit with them, be a patient listener, be a patient, hear them out, discuss with them. It's always very nice. It's always very enriching. Yeah, having said that, my question to both the authors is, I mean, I haven't read the book as of yet. All right. Let me, yeah, put that out first. I mean, I did get myself a copy during the last book fair, and congratulations to both of you. I'll be definitely reading that at the earliest after hearing, from both of you today. So my question to both the authors, and either one could answer, like. Since I mean, I have not been in Dimahasa or even Karbi Anglong for a very long time. I'm in Gwalpara right now, and so this just question comes to me, right? The work that you discussed about the women, the tribal women in Karbi Anglong and Dimahasa. I mean, what would you say? How different, is the everyday life or the chores or even the conservation practices of the tribal communities of the Dimasa or the Karbi from, let's say, an Assamese woman in any other district of Assam, especially in a rural setting. I'm not talking about the urban setting, right? In a rural setting. I mean, since I have already admitted I haven't read the book as of yet, perhaps you refer to such works in your book as well, or maybe you could just suggest such works if you have referred to such in your book also. Documenting the everyday lives of the Assamese woman in comparison to the tribal woman in terms of conservation practices. I think that would be something that I'm really interested in. I mean, last time I think we had discussions with Meenal and all. Also, NESRC has been continuously producing works on tribal women in the past few years, and it is really commendable. It's important, definitely, that the lives of our women be documented from a gaze, and as Dejna pointed out, from the different from the colonial gaze. But can we also study the lives of the tribal as well as the women, let's say in the caste society, perhaps using similar methodologies? That is something that I would really be interested to study, and hence I asked this question. So what do you think are these? Are there anything you see similar? What are the differences have you seen while producing your own work? Is it something that you're interested in? Any other works that you'd like to suggest? I'd like to hear from both of you. Yeah, thank you.
So in our book, we have definitely not explored that of how it is similar to Assamese women in caste societies. We even if we have drawn inferences of similarities and dissimilarities, we have combined it with other tribes of the region. So that is something, I mean, definitely we can work on in the future. And I did so previous to this project, I did work on my project was on migration and women. I mean, there my focus was solely on Assamese women mostly, but then again, uh, the work that they were doing, they were not, they were basically not farmers. That was not my scope of study. So, I mean, yeah, that is something that we can take up on further.
I think the difference would come from the different way of cultivation also.
Yeah.
Because in these communities, the way of cultivating is
Different.
shifting cultivation, which uh, depends on like community ownership. So that has like certain implications on gender roles and um, gender chores in the fields. And whereas um, in wet paddy cultivation, roles are distributed in different ways. Like I touched upon, even Nipasa mentioned the plowing. So in Juming communities, there is no plowing. There is simply broadcasting and like very light tilling. So plowing is not done. But when shifting cultivation communities, I mean, a household that practiced starts practicing paddy, these ideas come with the new form of cultivation. Because you have to plow, the question comes in, who will be the one plowing? So it is usually the man. So in small ways, with the shift in the type of agriculture and land ownership patterns change, division of labor changes. Yeah, and we actually have not dealt with this in our book, but yeah, it is an interesting thing we can explore. Thank you for that question, Rakhi.
Thank you so much. I mean, I think it actually opens up an avenue of the potential. I don't know. I don't want to sound too obnoxious, but the potential, research questions that can be explored, and also the scope to give back also to the community, because we've been talking about this, like how do you give back? How do you give back? And while quote unquote the question of giving incentive is considered as an unethical practice, but we all know the realities of how fieldwork is done, right? And why not? Right? If these are small ways through which we can make our storytellers feel like that they have, contributed, and like this is the whole point, no? Like meanings are created differently and it's experienced differently. If this is their way of saying that yes, we feel the worth here, if you give us something, then I think it's okay, right? So I mean, our field should guide us in what sort of ethics and what sort of code of conduct we follow. And yeah, so I think there's a comment again. Oh, from Humi. Yeah, so she's, thank you so much. I mean, she's congratulating both of you. I'm sure you can read it as well. Okay, if we don't have any more questions, I think we can, I mean, I can end my part at least here. Before I hand over to Rakhi to conclude the session, I just want to thank both the authors. Thank you so much to Dejna and Nipasha for making time and for sharing with us uh, in depth about your work and, of course, about your insights and your experiences. And I thank the audience as well, like for being sticking around. It's a weekday, but whoever is here could be here. I think your book is really important. It does offer a very, very vital perspective on gender, on indigenous knowledge. So thank you once again. And without any further ado, I hand over to Rakhi for the concluding remarks. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Pami. Um, yeah, I mean, like I said, I haven't read the book yet, but the entire discussion and what I heard from both Nipasa and Dejna, I think it's really important at this point of time, to document, to study, or I mean, the practices of our women, and I think I feel from today's discussion that all of that has been brought out beautifully in this book. And it obviously leads to more questions. So much more can be done, and I'm looking forward to more such works in the near future from our authors. I'm sure that this is not the last time Nipasa is visiting either Karbi Anglong or Dima Hasao, and more studies will be carried out. Different perspectives, new areas to study and to cover, and we'll have such beautiful discussions in the near future as well. I think on this note, I'll conclude today's session. Once again, I thank Nipasa, I thank Dejna, and of course, I thank Pamidi for making today's program indeed very, very insightful, very successful. And but yeah, I think we'll conclude on this note. That's all. Thank you so much, Jutai, and good evening to all. Good night. Yes.
Good night and Jutai.
everyone.
Bye bye.
Everyone.
Thank you.